24th of September, 2025, the day the cracks finally spread wide enough for everyone to see. I told you it was coming. I whispered. I shouted. I painted it in front of your faces. But you laughed, didn't you? You thought the walls were unbreakable, the system too strong, the order too perfect to fail. But collapse never announces itself with fireworks. It creeps, it rots, it eats from the inside until one day the whole thing caves in. And now here we are, standing in the ruins, and all those warnings you brushed aside echo louder than ever. Collapse begins quietly before anyone notices. It doesn't kick down the door with sirens and flashing lights. No, it slips in, silent, patient, like a shadow that grows longer with every passing day. People expect destruction to arrive with noise, but real collapse is quieter than that. It hides in plain sight. A crack in the foundation here, a loose thread there. And while everyone is busy laughing, celebrating, pretending everything is fine, the rot spreads. By the time they look down, the ground beneath their feet has already been eaten hollow. That's the nature of it. It doesn't happen all at once. It begins with little signs, signs nobody wants to see. A rule bent here, a truth ignored there, a silence that should have been a scream but wasn't. And people, oh, they love to ignore what makes them uncomfortable. They convince themselves it's nothing, just bad luck, just a phase, just the cost of living. They drink their distractions, swallow their comforts, and look the other way while the decay grows teeth. That's how collapse wins, by using their blindness as fuel. It's never the big explosions that destroy empires. It's the termites, small, invisible, working day and night, chewing through the beams while the house still looks perfect from the outside. And people walk through it, smiling, clapping, decorating the walls, never realizing the floor is seconds away from giving out. By the time it happens, they gasp, they cry, they scream. How could this happen so suddenly? But it wasn't sudden. It was always happening. They just never wanted to see it. Quiet collapse is cruel because it pretends to be normal. It lets you carry on your daily rituals. It lets you chase your little dreams. It lets you pretend everything is under control. And then, in one sharp moment, it reveals the truth. You were never standing on solid ground. Every laugh, every plan, every comfort was built on hollow lies. Collapse doesn't shout, it waits. And when it strikes, it's already too late to run. But people, they don't like warnings. They hate them. Tell them the walls are cracking. They'll laugh. Tell them the fire is spreading. They'll say it's just a little smoke. Tell them collapse is coming, and they'll call you insane. Because it's easier to believe in stability, in safety, in the illusion that tomorrow will look just like today. Collapse counts on that. It thrives on denial. It grows stronger every time someone shrugs and says, everything will be fine. And that's the beauty of it, isn't it? Collapse doesn't have to fight its way in. It's welcomed. It's invited. People themselves build it by ignoring what's right in front of them. They stack lie upon lie, illusion upon illusion, until the weight is unbearable. And when the structure finally caves, they act surprised. as if they weren't the ones feeding it all along. The silence before the fall is the loudest sound no one hears. It's in the fake smiles, the forced laughter, the empty promises. It's in the way everyone knows something is wrong, but no one dares to say it out loud. That's how collapse hides. That's how it grows. And when it finally shows its face, when the quiet turns into rubble, people pretend it was sudden, unexpected, unpredictable. But deep down they knew, they always knew. Collapse begins quietly, not because it has to, but because people allow it to. They'd rather sleep than wake up to the truth. They'd rather close their eyes than face the cracks spreading beneath them. And so, it spreads, patient, unstoppable, until one day the silence breaks, and everyone realizes they were living in a house already burning to the ground. Warnings are always ignored until it's too late. People don't want to hear them, not really. They nod, they smirk, they pretend to listen, but deep down they don't believe. A warning doesn't fit their fantasy. It scratches at the little bubble they've built around themselves, the one filled with comfort, routine, safety. So when someone stands in front of them and says, "It's coming," they laugh. They roll their eyes. They call it paranoia, exaggeration, madness. Not because the warning isn't true, but because the truth is too heavy for their fragile little worlds. You see, people only accept what feels good. They want sweet lies, not bitter truths. They want promises that everything will stay the same, that nothing will ever change, that the order they cling to will never break. A warning threatens all of that. It forces them to look at cracks in the wall, to smell the smoke behind the curtain, to admit that maybe they aren't as safe as they pretend. And that's something they can't handle. So they laugh at the warning. They mock the messenger. They bury the thought deep down. Easier to deny than to prepare. But warnings don't stop being true just because people refuse to hear them. The fire still burns whether they acknowledge the smoke or not. The cracks still spread whether they choose to look or keep their eyes closed. A warning is a mirror, and people hate mirrors. They don't want to see their weakness, their ignorance, their helplessness. They want to stay blind until blindness betrays them. And then comes the collapse. Suddenly the same voices who mocked, who ignored, who dismissed, now they cry out. They scream, "Why didn't anyone tell us?" They beg for answers, for explanations, for rescue. But the warnings were always there. They were painted on the walls, whispered in their ears, shouted from the rooftops. They weren't hidden, they were rejected. Because people only hear what they want to, and warnings don't fit their songs of comfort. The tragic comedy of it all is that the ones who warn are always ridiculed. They're called pessimists, doomsayers, maniacs. Society loves to silence them because their words taste bitter. But those same people, when the collapse finally arrives, are the first to be remembered as prophets. Too late, of course. Too late for anyone to act. Warnings only make sense when time is still left, and people waste that time laughing. Warnings are not for the weak. They're not for the masses. They're for the few who can stand the sting of truth, who are willing to prepare while everyone else dances. But that's why so few ever listen. The majority prefers the illusion. They wrap themselves in comfort and call it reality, never realizing the fire is already at their door. By the time they hear the warning clearly, it's no longer a warning. It's a funeral bell. That's how it always goes. The world has a pattern. Someone shouts, "Wake up." Everyone laughs. Someone cries, "The cracks are here." Everyone shrugs. Someone screams, "The collapse is coming." Everyone mocks. And then one day the floor gives out, and the same people who ridiculed now whisper regret. They whisper about how they should have listened, should have acted, should have taken it seriously. But warnings don't rewind time. They don't bend to regret. They stand tall, cold, unchanging, as proof that people had a chance and chose blindness. The cruel joke is that people don't actually hate the warning. They hate themselves for knowing it's true. That's why they attack it, why they bury it. Because every warning is a mirror, and deep down, they recognize their own reflection. They know the comfort they cling to is fragile. They know the stability they worship is an illusion. But instead of facing it, they laugh, they mock, they silence. Until the silence grows louder than any voice, and the warning becomes reality. Systems don't collapse because of the enemies outside. No, they fall because of the disease within. The rot starts in silence, hidden in shadows, where no one dares to look. People think danger comes with banners, with armies, with noise. But the real danger is quieter. It's in the corruption, whispered behind locked doors, in the greed no one wants to expose, in the small cracks everyone ignores. It's the little betrayals that no one talks about, the compromises that chip away at the foundation. The walls don't fall because someone pushed them too hard from the outside. They fall because termites have been eating them alive from the inside. But people don't see that. They look at the surface and think everything's fine. They see the lights still shining, the machines still running, the leaders still smiling, and they convince themselves the structure is strong. They don't notice the hollow sound when you knock on the walls, or the way the ground trembles under their feet. They choose not to notice, because noticing would mean admitting they've been living inside a corpse dressed up to look alive. The system feeds on denial. It thrives when people don't question, when they look away, when they pretend that everything is in order. And the irony is, the stronger it looks on the outside, the weaker it really is inside. Every great empire, every perfect system, every untouchable order, gone, not because someone attacked it, but because it consumed itself. The outside world only has to give it a little push, and it topples like a house of cards. Rot doesn't happen overnight. It builds, slowly, quietly, day after day, piece by piece. The foundation erodes while the people inside keep dancing. They celebrate, they boast, they talk about how unshakable it all is. And yet, beneath their feet, the floorboards are softening. The very thing they depend on is disintegrating while they sing songs of permanence. By the time they realize the truth, it's already too late. The structure doesn't warn you with a shout. It warns you with silence, with unease, with whispers most people refuse to hear. And when the collapse begins, they act surprised, shocked, as if no one could have seen it coming. They cry out, "Who destroyed us? Who attacked us? Who broke our world?" But the answer is always the same. No one had to destroy it. No one had to attack. They did it themselves. They built their kingdom on greed, on lies, on shortcuts, on selfishness. They let the termites in and gave them permission to feast. And then, when the beams finally snapped, they looked for someone else to blame. That's the cruel beauty of rot. It hides in plain sight. It grows where no one wants to look. And the system knows how to mask it. Smiles on television, promises in speeches, celebrations of progress. All while the guts of the machine are corroding. People want the illusion more than the truth. So they never ask what's underneath. They don't want to know. Because knowing means realizing they've been worshiping something already dead. Every system carries the seed of its own destruction. That's the law. The bigger it grows, the deeper the rot. The more it promises, the heavier the lies. And still, the people clap. They cheer. They defend the very thing that's eating them alive. Because they'd rather feel safe inside a collapsing house than admit the house is collapsing. That's the trick. That's the joke. That's how it always ends. The inside kills the outside. The heart rots before the skin cracks. By the time anyone sees the collapse, the decay has been there for years, maybe decades. But people don't notice decay until it touches them personally. Until their roof caves in. Until their walls crumble. Until their world falls. And then, suddenly they care. Suddenly they cry out. Suddenly they wonder how it happened. But the truth is, it didn't just happen. It was happening all along. They just refuse to see it. People cling to illusions of stability because reality terrifies them. They need to believe that tomorrow will look like today, that the roof above their head will never leak, that the world they know will stay exactly the same. It's a little lullaby they sing to themselves, a story they repeat over and over until it feels like truth. But illusions are fragile things made of glass, and the moment life throws a stone, everything shatters. Still, people would rather clutch broken pieces in their bleeding hands than admit they were holding lies all along. Stability is the greatest trick ever sold. It's the promise that nothing will change, that the ground beneath you will never move. But everything changes, everything shifts, everything collapses eventually. Deep down, people know this, but they push it away. They drown it in distractions, in entertainment, in routine. As long as the lights stay on, as long as the shops stay open, as long as their lives feel predictable, they tell themselves it's all secure. They live in a house built on sand and pretend it's stone. The illusion doesn't just comfort them, it blinds them. They stop asking questions, stop noticing the cracks, stop preparing for storms. Because to prepare is to admit weakness, and to admit weakness is to face the truth. People don't want the truth, they want the performance. They want their leaders to stand on stages and smile, to promise them order, safety, and control. They don't care if it's a lie, Not really, because the lie feels warm. It lets them sleep at night. It lets them pretend the monsters aren't already at the door. And when the illusion finally tears apart, they always act surprised. They stare at the rubble, wide-eyed, as if the world betrayed them. They say things like, "This wasn't supposed to happen," or "No one could have seen this coming." But it was always coming. The signs were always there. They just didn't want to look. They traded awareness for comfort. And comfort is a debt that always comes due. The real cruelty is that illusions don't just keep people calm, they keep them weak. If you think the world will never change, you never learn to adapt. If you think the system is unshakable, you never prepare for when it cracks. And when the collapse arrives, the illusion doesn't protect you. It strangles you. The very lie you clung to becomes the chain around your neck, dragging you down while the few who saw through it are already running free. But people don't learn. Even after collapse, even after ruin, they build new illusions. They tell themselves, "This time it's different. This time it will last. This time it's real stability." And the cycle repeats. Because people don't want freedom. Not really. They want certainty. They don't want truth. They want comfort. They'll embrace a beautiful lie 1,000 times over before they accept a brutal truth once. And that's why collapse isn't just inevitable. It's deserved. Because the crowd doesn't live in reality. They live in dreams stitched together by fear, and dreams always end when the alarm finally rings. Illusions of stability are like paper walls painted to look like steel. From a distance, they seem strong, unbreakable. But the moment pressure hits, the paper rips, and everyone inside realizes they were never safe. That's when the panic begins. That's when the screaming starts. Not because the collapse was unexpected, but because the illusion was too convincing. They forgot it was paper. They believed it was steel. And when belief meets reality, reality always wins. Truth always sounds like madness before it becomes reality. That's the curse of seeing the cracks before everyone else. You point, you scream, you warn, and what do? They laugh. They call you crazy, paranoid, delusional. Because to them, nothing looks broken yet. The streets are still lit. The buildings are still standing. The routines are still playing out day after day. How could you be right when everything looks so normal? That's the trick of truth. It doesn't arrive with trumpets and parades. It creeps in quietly, showing itself only to the ones willing to look past the surface. But people don't like surface shattering. They don't like their little worlds disturbed. So they brand the truth as insanity. It's easier that way. If the messenger is insane, then the message doesn't matter. They can laugh it away, dismiss it, bury it under jokes and ridicule. That way they don't have to face the weight of the words. That way they can keep sleeping while the cracks deepen. To them, madness is safer than truth. And then time passes. The cracks widen. The ground begins to shake. Slowly, the world they trusted starts to twist. And suddenly, the words that sounded insane don't seem so insane anymore. They start whispering to each other, repeating the very warnings they mocked. They look at you with different eyes, not laughing now, but searching, almost desperate, because madness has turned into memory, and the truth has finally caught up with them. But by then, the luxury of time is gone. That's how it always works. First they laugh, then they ignore, then they fight, and finally they beg. The same people who spat in your face for speaking are the ones who will crawl to you when the walls start to fall. Not because they suddenly respect you, but because they realize you weren't mad. You were awake. And being awake in a world of dreamers is the greatest crime there is. People don't forgive you for breaking their illusion, not even when it saves them. The label of madness is a mask. It's how the world hides from what it doesn't want to face. Every truth teller, every visionary, every prophet was called mad before being called right. Society has a way of silencing what it fears by laughing at it, and people cling to that laughter. Because as long as they're laughing, they don't have to act. They don't have to prepare. They don't have to admit their world is weaker than they want it to be. But the truth doesn't care about being believed. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't need applause. It just sits patiently, waiting for the right moment to arrive. And when it does, the same crowd that mocked will crumble, their laughter replaced with screams. That's when they realize madness was never madness. It was foresight. It was clarity. It was the vision they lacked, but were too proud to accept. The tragedy is that truth doesn't become reality when people accept it. It becomes reality when it's too late to stop. The warnings are never valued in time. They only matter when the damage is done. And that's the cruel joke, isn't it? You can scream until your throat bleeds, but until the fire reaches their door, they'll call you insane for smelling smoke. Truth and madness are twins. They look the same in the beginning, but one grows stronger while the other fades. What separates them isn't logic or proof. It's time. Time is what turns the whisper of a lunatic into the prophecy of a genius. Time is what transforms laughter into regret, and in the end, the only difference between being mocked as mad and being remembered as right is how long it takes for reality to catch up.